Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to 2022, the year that has the potential to become one of the greatest in the history of the Final Fantasy franchise. There are already 4 games penciled in to release throughout the year, with 3 coming out in the first quarter, and there are no doubt plenty of other events planned in connection to the numerous persistent games operated by Square Enix that will celebrate the franchise's 35th anniversary. But before we get too excited, it should be noted that previous anniversary years have not delivered on much of their promise. The 30th anniversary in particular was pretty disappointing, as outside of the opening ceremony event, where a load of expensive 30th anniversary merchandise was unveiled and senior figures shared a few updates about already known projects, there were no specific games announced or released in celebration of the milestone outside of a new iteration of Itadaki Street that was exclusive to Japan. In short, the year ended up being pretty underwhelming, and we have to hope that lessons have been learned, not just from that celebration, but also from how successful the Dragon Quest 35th anniversary event was last year. They announced a whole host of initiatives alongside 5 games and the next expansion for Dragon Quest X, and even though very few of those games were penciled in for release within the actual anniversary year, it led to so much excitement and positive vibes around the franchise. Yoshinori Kitase, who has now replaced Shinji Hashimoto as the Final Fantasy brand manager, teased that there should be plenty of reasons for fans to have similar expectations for Final Fantasy this year. Within his end-of-year interview with Famitsu, he said his key phrase for next year was simply 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy, and when delivering a New Year's message via the Portal app, he promised that there would be new games and project announcements throughout the year, as well as plenty of surprises and fun initiatives related to the anniversary. Given that Square Enix has already announced quite a few games that will be launching this year, that's quite an intriguing prospect, as we have to assume Kitase is not just referring to Final Fantasy XVI. For the 30th anniversary, invitations were sent out for the opening ceremony in December of the previous year, with the event itself hosted on the 31st of January 2017 at the Toho Cinema in Roppongi. There has been no word of anything similar happening this time around, but it should be safe to assume that there will be some kind of showcase this year. And that's because outside of it being the 35th anniversary of the franchise, there are also plenty of other milestones that Square Enix will want to recognise, including, but not limited to, Final Fantasy VII and Tactics turning 25, Final Fantasy XI turning 20, Crisis Core turning 15, and Mystic Quest and Final Fantasy V turning 30. For now though, let's just focus on what we know, and the best place to start is with Final Fantasy XVI. At the end of 2020, Naoki Yoshida promised that more information about the next major installment into the Final Fantasy franchise would be delivered at some point throughout 2021. But as the days drifted away and Final Fantasy XVI failed to appear at every major event and livestream, it became quite clear that there would be no update. On the 27th of December, this led to Yoshida issuing a statement. Within, he apologised for missing the promised deadline and explained that 2021 had been a consistent struggle due to ongoing issues caused by the global pandemic. Communication had been the main struggle, with it becoming so bad that in some instances assets that were meant to be delivered by outsourcing partners had to just be completely written off. Those struggles have led to them needing to delay the game by at least 6 months, but Yoshida assured fans that they would now be ready to have their big re-reveal in spring 2022, which means there will be a huge focus placed on Final Fantasy XVI at some point between the 20th of March and the 21st of June. Much of the year will be spent increasing the quality of the graphics, refining combat mechanics, fleshing out individual battles, putting the finishing touches on cutscenes, and conducting overall graphical optimization. They hope the big reveal will build excitement ahead of the game's eventual release, but Yoshida stopped short of saying when fans should expect the game to release, only saying to Famitsu that this year would be one of painstaking testing and polishing. But I want to pose a question to all of you though. Do you think Yoshida will announce the release date for Final Fantasy XVI at this re-reveal in spring, or do you think it will come at a later date? The other major game being worked on by Yoshida, Final Fantasy XIV, was also affected by the pandemic, with Endwalker being delayed only a few weeks before its initial release date. It would end up being released on the 7th of December and has proved to be another major success for Creative Business Unit 3, with Square Enix being forced to stop sales of the game for a second time as they attempt to address the incredible server congestion fans have been facing around the world. There have been consistent reports of players being stuck in queues of 4,000 to 8,000 players, with the servers periodically just collapsing due to extreme levels of stress. Square Enix has only been forced to take this step due to the global chip shortage, something that has prevented them from simply buying new server hardware. In spite of these issues, Endwalker has been a resounding success. Metacritic rated it as the best PlayStation game of 2021, and fans around the world have been waxing lyrical about the story. But even though Endwalker concludes the tale they started all the way back with the original Final Fantasy XIV, Yoshida assured fans in his New Year's message that the journey is far from over. He also encouraged fans to keep a close eye on updates they plan to share, as ahead of the release of patch 6.1, they hope to reveal what they have in store for the future of Final Fantasy XIV. Elsewhere within Square Enix, work is underway on initiatives that they hope will breathe new life into the franchise, the first of which is Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. Developed by Team Ninja, who are known for working on Dissidia NT as well as the Neo franchise, Stranger of Paradise will serve as a mature reimagining of the original Final Fantasy that was released almost 35 years ago. As such, it will focus on the story of Jack Garland and 4 other companions who claim to be the Warriors of Light as they seek out Chaos in order to defeat him and fulfill the prophecy. To gain feedback ahead of its release on the 18th of March, Team Ninja produced 2 trial versions. They each gave a glimpse of what players can expect from the final product when it releases, but with only a few months until launch, there is still so much unknown about the story and the role that original characters like Astos, Tiamat and Princess Sarah will now play, and we are very curious to see how everything pans out. Releasing the week before, as a Nintendo Switch exclusive, will be CHOCOBO GP. There have been rumours floating around throughout 2021 that Square Enix were planning to revitalise the CHOCOBO racing IP, and this new game was announced on the 23rd of September during a Nintendo Direct broadcast. Much like the original game, CHOCOBO GP will see the Final Fantasy franchise return to the kart racing scene, with players able to race as characters from all over the franchise, as well as characters from the CHOCOBO franchise. It is said that there will be at least 20 characters featured in the game, but it's unclear whether they will be available at launch, as the game's director, Akihiko Maeda, asked fans during the Tokyo Game Show which characters they would like to see featured, and evaded questions about whether there would be downloadable tracks and characters available post-launch. Ever since the Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered series was announced, fans were desperate to know when they would all be releasing. The first 5 were made available to fans throughout 2021, but Final Fantasy VI was pushed back to ensure the best possible experience. At the moment, we only know that it's planned to release at some point throughout February, but perhaps because of the delay, Square Enix did announce that they will be providing additional bonuses for those who pre-order, including 2 additional time-lapse tracks and 2 new wallpapers. Amongst the numerous mobile games that Square Enix operates in relation to Final Fantasy, there are bound to be a whole host of celebrations and events planned throughout the year. But so far, only one has been revealed in relation to the big milestone, and it's taking place in Brave Exvius. If you're playing the Japanese version, a 35th anniversary event started on the 28th of December last year, running through until the 20th of January this year, and it will enable you to acquire Rain in Final Fantasy I form and Laswell in Final Fantasy IV form. Outside of specific events related to anniversaries, Brave Exvius, War of the Visions, Record Keeper and Opera Omnia show no signs of slowing down, and they have each managed to forge bustling communities that continue to flourish. And then, there's Square Enix's latest mobile offering, Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier. There was quite a bit of apprehension prior to its release, but most of the feedback from the beta was addressed, and after a rather tumultuous launch that was plagued by server issues, The First Soldier has now really got into its groove. Numerous ambassadors were appointed, including the likes of Itaiki Moji, Blitz, Verifini and the Nightscope Prince, and as of the 28th of December, the game has been downloaded over 2 million times. The developers have also been very engaged, providing data on weapons that are being used most often, heat maps where players often dive or are defeated, and a consistent stream of improvements and adjustments to ensure the player base remains satisfied with the experience. As the game is competitive, expect this to continue throughout 2022, and expect there to be substantial changes when Season 2 begins, hopefully at some point in March. Announced at the same time as The First Soldier was Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Its tagline was another possibility for a remake, and it was given a provisional release window of 2022. However, since its announcement last February, we've heard pretty much nothing. We do know that it will encompass the entire original compilation, including Advent Children and Before Crisis, and it will be a turn-based experience that will be released in chapter-based format, similar to what will be seen in games like Opera Omnia. The plan is for new chapters to be released every month for free, but expect there to be plenty of monetization thrown in too, through numerous gacha-based pull mechanics. As it's planned to be released this year, we should expect to hear more information soon, especially as Kitase noted in his end-of-year interview with 4Gamer that he expects the world of Final Fantasy VII to continue to expand throughout the year. That could hint at even more projects being in production, and who knows if it means we'll hear anything more about Part 2 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. The other huge milestone for Final Fantasy this year comes with Final Fantasy XI, which will be celebrating its 20th anniversary. It's still amazing to see the game going strong, with an active community that seems to be growing despite the game's age. This year, in addition to a whole host of events celebrating the milestone that will build upon what was started last year, Akihiko Mitsui shared that there will be monthly additions to the Records of Eminence system and Ambuscade, as well as further expansion to the Ferocious Resurgence. Final Fantasy XI will also see further increases to the Master level cap, all new battle content added, the ability to reforge Empyrean equipment, and new storage systems to help with inventory management that will debut before April. Outside of Final Fantasy, Square Enix Japan has plenty of other projects to keep gamers entertained throughout the year, especially compared to what has been seen in previous years. And in that regard, all eyes are currently on Forspoken. Being developed by Luminous Productions, both Square Enix and PlayStation have been keen to thrust the spotlight on this timed PlayStation 5 exclusive wherever possible, but even though it's due to release on the 24th of May, there's still not much that's actually known about the game. Only a handful of short trailers have been published, with the developers choosing not to go into too much detail about the story or gameplay mechanics, and when some raw footage was published at the start of December, it only raised more questions as opposed to providing answers, and IGN ended up unpublishing the video. With less than half a year until release, here's hoping the development team can still produce a solid experience, as it's certainly a game that has a lot of intrigue surrounding it. Another game in a similar state is Babylon's Fall. This was announced back in 2018 as a PlayStation 4 exclusive, but it wouldn't be until 2021 that solid details would be shared about the game, at which point it was now re-revealed as being developed on the PlayStation 5 as well. What followed was a series of closed beta tests that received moderate praise and plenty of feedback, and with the game due to release on the 3rd of March, it's led to a lot of trepidation about what kind of state the game will be in when it launches, and whether it will be able to gather enough of a community to make it viable as a long-term ongoing experience. Another game releasing in March, Triangle Strategy, has not been plagued with the same issues. This was announced during a Nintendo Direct early last year as Project Triangle Strategy, and due to its focus on tactical combat and a brutal narrative, it has gained a lot of attention from fans of not just those who enjoy Bravely and Octopath games, but also those who enjoy Fire Emblem and of course, tactics. The playable demo was very well received, and with the main campaign said to be approximately 50 hours long, this promises to be yet another hit from Tomoya Asano and the rest of his team. Asano is also working on the next game in the Bravely franchise, a mobile game called Bravely Default Brilliant Lights. It's due to release very soon, as pre-registration has already started, but there's no hint that it will be released outside of Japan, especially as Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent has yet to be localized. Asano also hinted to 4Gamer that there will be multiple announcements this year in what promises to be the biggest year in the history of his team. A similar notion was also being championed by Akitoshi Kawazu, who heads up everything related to the SAGA franchise. During the SAGA series official broadcast, Producers Talk 2021 livestream, he said, "Currently we are also developing a title, and I think it would be nice if we could announce it somewhere next year, so please look forward to it." Kawazu later went on Twitter to inform the public that they're not just working on a brand new game, but are also working on a new remaster as well as a brand new remake. Fans of the Mana franchise should expect similar treatment, as not only is Echoes of Mana due to release on mobile devices this year, but they're also working on the creation of a brand new animated series called Legend of Mana: The Teardrop Crystal, and working on the development of a brand new game for consoles. After a 6-year hiatus, 2022 should also see the return of the Star Ocean franchise to home consoles with the release of Star Ocean: The Divine Force. This was announced during a State of Play at the end of 2021, and more information has been promised for spring of 2022. And that brings us on to Dragon Quest. Square Enix announced a ridiculous amount of games as part of the 35th anniversary celebration. Some of them are expected to release this year, although it's unclear how many will be released outside of Japan. Dragon Quest X Offline was due to release on the 26th of February, but it has since been delayed until the more vague period of summer 2022, as the developers have no doubt also struggled with the pandemic. There's also no word on whether this will be localized. We do know that there are plans to localize the Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake and Dragon Quest Treasures, but they've revealed no concrete dates for when the games will be released. And although Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai Infinity Strash was also re-revealed, again there was no release date shared. Outside of Square Enix, well, there are two projects that might be worth keeping an eye on. During his end-of-year talk with 4Gamer, Sakaguchi said that it would be worth keeping a close eye on Yasumi Matsuno, the creator of Tactics and Final Fantasy XII, who has also worked on Final Fantasy XIV. It said that he is working on the scenario for a brand new game. Hajime Tabata, the director of Crisis Core, Type 0 and Final Fantasy XV, also shared that one of the two games that his company are working on will be revealed this year. Earlier in 2021, Tabata had stated that one of the games would be a spiritual successor to Final Fantasy XV and the other would be a spiritual successor to Type 0, and we can't wait to see which one gets revealed. And with that, I think we're caught up with everything, and I hope you agree that this has the potential to be an amazing year for both fans of Final Fantasy and Square Enix Japan. But I'm going to leave you now with a question. Which game out of all the ones that have just been spoken about are you most looking forward to playing? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this update, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Alright guys, this is Daryl signing out. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, Anthony Hoffman and Gregory, who are super special Onion Knight supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.